I've been working on the front end here. Basically what it's made up of is some tube, 40-degree bend there down to the corner of the belly. And this cross tube here basically is a function of, I think, roughly where the front axle is going to be. So that cross tube is going to be roughly where the bump stop will mount. And it's enough distance here to where I could pluck the motor out, pull it far enough forward to get out from under the dash bar and clear that. So I don't need to make this removable. So that's part of what I wanted to do. And then basically a function of where I want the axle. Obviously the axle's in front of the motor, but you can measure with a 40-inch tire back to the slider. So that gives you an indication of where the tire would be, and then you add some inches. But basically it was just kind of aesthetics. I think that's where I like it. I think the motor's far enough back. And then I did some rough measurements. If I put the axle right under that tube, which again, it doesn't have to be, but it'll be somewhere in here. If I put it right under there, I ran a tape back and figured around 113, 115 inch wheelbase. You know, it puts the rear tires in what looks like a good place. Basically made two identical tubes. Same bend, same notch, laid them over each other on the ground to make sure they were equal. The tails were a little bit long. Made the crossbar with the distance away from the motor that I want it to be. And then I used jack stands here off of the chassis table and put a level across and got it all as level and square as I could figure. And then added these legs that go from the corner of basically the rock slider intersection of the A-pillar. They go uphill a little bit to the center of the bend on both sides. So that's tying those together. And then the third link, the upper link, will be kind of right where the tip of my finger is, tucked in there. And it should have enough room up and down to cycle in there. So we'll see how that all works out. Next up, gonna add a bar that comes up here, kicks in and ties to that. There's some cars I've seen where they basically spread these bars further apart so that they can get a straight shot down. But I just didn't really want to have the dash bar, or you know, this headache bar, whatever they call it. I didn't want it way out in my line of sight, so I kind of split the difference. And I don't think putting a little bend in there is going to really impact strength all that much. Got this tube coming in. Just aesthetically, I used the same 40-degree bend that I did on this tube. Not sure that'll ever matter to anybody, but sometimes matching bends kind of gives it a little bit of style, but ties all that together. Still gives me enough room to lift the motor up, drag it out when the time comes, and then been just slowly working on this guy here to match on the other side. So real close, just a little fine tuning there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and tack this one in. Tonight I've been working on motor mounts. So the plate and poly bushings and bracket are a kit from Rough Stuff Specialties, which I like this kit because it's 5-hole, which the aluminum blocks use 5 holes. I don't know if the steel do, but I know the aluminums typically have an extra bolt. And then I could clock this at a slight angle. You can see it from there, which the idea is when I put a cherry picker on the motor, I lift slightly and pull it forward, which is what it needs to get out from under the dash bar. So oriented the motor mount there in an angle that I think is going to be conducive to that. And then of course the tranny mount in the back, things just move straight front to back. So that's easy enough there. Used a small tube here to gusset that, which I just kind of like the look of it, and it should be good there. So next up is going to be to replicate that on the other side. And I finished out that bar there, and so that I could tack the center bar and put all those together. So that part of the halo is done. Did all that out of 090. This here is also out of 090, which is a short span, and I knew it was gonna gusset it, so I think it'll be great. Motor mounts in on both sides. Got their gussets, everything's tacked, but I think it's enough to hold until I get it out of the car. But moment of truth, let's see if the car will hold up its own weight now. Might need a little more. It is holding its own weight. Don't mind that the oil pan doesn't look centered. It's just a weirdly shaped oil pan. Pretty cool. car and drivetrain, now one unit. Getting started on the rear 4-link, and this is my vision. Lower triangulated, come out there, link brackets aren't there, and then the uppers are going to be straight or ever so slightly out, but probably dead straight, and those are going to be the upper trailing arms. So talked to a buddy, we ran some numbers on kind of roughly where I think things need to be. One of the critical dimensions here is how far you spread these upper mounts, because they're essentially your shock mounts. So if you put them too far out, when you flex, the tire gets into the shock and you're hosed there. If you put them too skinny or too narrow, then you have very little damping at the tire and the thing handles bad. So this is 1.5 inches further spread than my Jeep has. Now I'm using the same shock package, but I'm hoping I can get away with that because the shocks are no longer going to be mounted right at the center line of the tire, aka on the center of the axle tube. They're going to be scooted forward. So my hope is when articulating that the tallest point of the tire is behind where the shocks are going to be. A little bit of a gamble there, but it'll stay tacked for a while until we get to that stage. If they need to go narrower, they need to go narrower. We'll just have to see. Working on the lowers here. To set the angle, basically I have center line of the chassis. That's helping me set the spread of how far apart I want them. Basically, I'm targeting 8 inches on center between the brackets. And then I just put some shims under there to the chassis table to lift the chassis up a little bit. That will give the brackets just a slight angle down, which will give them a better transition to the links. So I think I like that. I'm going to play with how much angle I want on them. But the lower you space those below the belly, obviously they hang up on rocks more, but I think I do want a little bit of dip because if they're dead flat, there's no transition to the skid plate. And if you were, backing over a ledge or something like that, it would want to peel the skid plate off of the belly. So I think they want to be down a little bit, and that down a little bit helps you get flatter links while moving the ride height of the vehicle up. So I think it's kind of a best of all worlds here. So right now I think those are about where they're going to be. And then the lower brackets, I'm using that guy right there. One of these that's angled, but I need a little more angle on it, so I'll fine tune that. And basically you just radius cut the inside till you get it more aimed. But I want it to be aimed essentially straight in. So keep prodding, see when it starts to look like something. At the dreaded stage where to work on the rear 4-link, I need the Johnny joints out of the front of the red Jeep. And to progress on the front end, I need the axle out of the red Jeep. So nothing to it but to do it. So today's the day we'll start tearing this all apart.